the way.
We want it been.
Welcome to episode 194 of the Smugglers Galaxy Podcast, your favorite Star Wars podcast for smugglers in the galaxy. Happy Labor Day, a week late, or a day late, sorry.
Memorial
day
Day.
Memorial Day. Jesus.
Cut to August. Happy Memorial Day.
It's late. We've already recorded an episode from last week. So with us again is Mr. Jerry Hancock. Jerry, how are you, buddy?
Doing well. How are you guys?
I'm good. Hey, did you pick anything up this week?
No. I've not had a chance to go out. Sorry. Nothing new for me.
I picked up a Sabine TIE Fighter and some plans for the Death Star. Yeah.
I went to a flea market and I found this black wampa. It was only 2 cents. I was like, I'll just take this black wampa that doesn't look painted and is of an era where Star Wars was king.
Right.
I did order one of those transfers, Glenn. I sent you the money. So
okay, cool. I just screenshot that stuff and send it to Narayan. He keeps up with it because it's just he's the king of keeping up with that stuff because it's like it's a lot. But anyway,
I think that's his methadone for Rogue Fun is he's still dealing Rogue Fun swag.
He is. He's like, we got to get it sold now.
And speaking of Rogue Fun, we're here to talk about your panel because we're going to play your panel this episode, Jerry.
Sweet.
How was tell us about the process of preparing for the panel. You thanked a lot of people at the end. So like, what was their level of involvement? How much did you already know? What did you have to look up?
I'll be honest.
I know everything.
I'm always researching. Really, it's what I do. I'm always digging. My background is predominantly retail history, but Sears has obviously played a huge portion of that research. So yeah, I mean, really, the Sears aspect of it was pretty easy because I mean, I know that stuff backwards and forwards, so it was not really that big a deal to pull that in. The biggest thing that I was struggling with, and again, this is something that I've been sort of trying to tie together for probably a couple of years now, of finding some sort of connection between Sears and Kenner, and finding some sort of missing link at Kenner that had ties to Sears sales reps or buyers, to see just how much of a working relationship they had. And I have been trying to tie that up for, like I say, for a couple of years now. And it's really been a struggle because, I've talked to some pretty prominent folks in the collecting community, and they all sort of say the same thing, that, the folks who would have been a role in that are either no longer with us, or they don't remember a lot of the details, and that has been the biggest hang up for the whole process of sort of trying to tie that together. I spoke to Ron Salvatore about this because Ron has a pretty big knowledge of a lot of the mail order multi-packs and things of that nature. If you go to Star Wars Collectors Archives, which was one of the pages that I thanked, Ron has a whole page on mail order not just for the United States, but also for Canada, for Sears, for Montgomery Ward, for J.C. Penney. It's a pretty broad subject, and really, he's sort of, I would say, probably one of the bigger experts, if you will, on that topic. So, I spoke to him. I spoke to Ben Sheehan, who obviously, wow, the guy's a legend in the collecting world. He came across a couple of things. Actually met someone from, I can't remember if he said they were from Kenner or from Sears. I want to say they were from Sears, and they had a folder of sales rep information, letters, correspondence, line art, things of that nature, but wanted an astronomical price for it. And when Ben's not willing to do business, it was extremely expensive. But he passed on it. And so, yeah, the real struggle for me has been trying to find that missing link. So what I ended up doing was finding some interviews with Bernie Loomis that were conducted just before he passed away. And one of the better interviews was actually on KennerCollector.com, which is a great site, great resources, great forums. Kenner employees occasionally chime in there. They got a lot of interviews with former Kenner employees and people who work for the company. And I did find a good bit of stuff where Bernie Loomis, early in his career in the 1950s, was working with Sears. I mean, they were the world's largest retailer. So, of course you want to do business with them. But I found some great quotes too. Bernie talked about being a kid, because Bernie didn't have a lot of money. He was a very poor kid, grew up in the Bronx, and collected baseball cards. That was like his thing, So I think he understood the collecting bug from that perspective. But I also think he understood the magic of mail order catalogs, because in this one quote, he talks about the Lionel train sets. And he had a Lionel train set catalog, full color catalog, and basically said, because I had that catalog, I owned everything in it. And I do think that was a big part of the magic of the Sears Wish Book, because, we didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid. And, for a poor kid, I did get a good bit. I was an only child. So, I was joking with Ryan Shaw about that. And it's like, for a poor kid, I got a lot of the stuff, but I was the only kid. So that helped. But I understood that, because, there were so many things that I have since, as you can see here behind me, have since managed to acquire, because I wanted it since I was a kid, because that catalog, I had that catalog, and going through and looking at those images, I made this point in the panel about how a lot of the images, especially for Kenner products, they would always put children playing with the toy in the images in the catalog, just like they did on a lot of the early box art. They show the play pattern, whether it's on the box art, or whether it's in the pages in the mail order catalog, or whether it's on the television commercials. Those television commercials were brilliant, because it really showed kids, this is how you play with it. It showed kids, use your imagination to create these environments. They really were, I think Kenner was really big on that. And I think that worked with the Sears Wish Book. That visual, that play pattern, that toyetic thing that, you always hear mentioned with Bernie Loomis is, I think, pretty apparent in the pages of the Wish Book. So I ended up really doing it more, as opposed to finding detailed examples between the two companies' correspondence and those kinds of things, which is all but impossible to find, as far as I can tell so far. When you got collectors like Ben Sheehan telling you, yeah, there's just not a lot out there, or a lot of those folks are no longer with us, or their health is not good, or their memory is not good. I guess that was the best option I had. And I think I felt like I made the best of it, as far as, comparing these two marketing geniuses, whether it be Richard Sears and how he made Sears the company that it became, and the marketing genius of somebody like Bernie Loomis, who I think fully understood the power of mail order catalogs and how that tool could be implemented, how using mail order as a gimmick, really, because if you look at the early bird set, that was a mail order gimmick. He created this package, this cardboard box, they call it the empty box campaign, and then they're going to send you these figures later. And I had, that was another thing that was great about Rogue Fun, was being able to talk to folks. I had so many people come to me with their Sears stories. It really touched a nerve with a lot of people. I think just looking at those pages touches a nerve for a lot of people. And so I talked to those individuals, and they talked about what that catalog meant to them, that magic that it brought, even if you couldn't afford to buy the items. And so that was really the best dynamic that I could get of Sears and Bernie Loomis, and sort of understanding the power of it. I mean, we had the mail-aways with the proof of purchase. I do think mail order was really central to the marketing plan. I use the example of the holiday special. The holiday special, let's be honest, was a 90-minute commercial for toys.
Well, now you get
drop those commercial segments in there that highlighted all the new stuff that they had coming out. They put a big emphasis on the cantina. There was a whole segment of the holiday special on the cantina.
Yeah.
Well, what a coincidence. We're selling cantinas in the Sears catalog this year. I mean, you can't tell me that stuff was not planned. It was, today when we see it, like when a new Star Wars movie comes out, that sort of marketing juggernaut, it's a science now.
Yeah.
We were seeing the origins of that, I think, in 1978. And I think Sears catalogs played a big role in it. So
yeah, you're now starting to get into the content of the panel. So why don't we roll the panel, and we'll come back and we'll ask you like a couple questions about your experience, and we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good.
So hey, Jason.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason, what did Yoda ride as a kid?
I have no clue. What did he ride?
A do cycle, because there's no try. All right, so our first panel is Santa Shop Here, Star Wars, The Golden Age of Sears Wish Book by our buddy Jerry Hancock. Jerry is a Georgia-based Star Wars collector, educator, and historian. His collector focuses on Star Wars exclusives offered through the Sears catalog. He's also the author of Ponce City Market, The Rise and Fall and Rebirth of Atlanta's Largest Building, which originally served as the Sears Southeast catalog distribution center and retail store in Atlanta. While researching, and you see now he didn't put stuff on the same page, so I got to do that. While researching on Sears and its cultural impact on the American South, he concluded interviews with dozens of former Sears employees and executives. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jerry Hancock.
Hey guys, I'm used to standing up to do this, so I teach high school. I actually am about to leave the classroom, high school classroom, and switch over to community college this fall, so it's a big change for me. But I'm used to dealing with a room full of folks who I really don't care what they think, and here I am, a room full of people I really care what they think. No pressure, right? No pressure. Really all of this sort of ties back to Star Wars, because as I was getting ready to go to graduate school about 20 years ago,
see 45 at the top.
I had one of my classmates had told me I was trying to sort of figure out a topic for my master's thesis. One of my colleagues had said, well, you better choose something that you love, because you're going to hate it by the time you're done with it. And I said, well, I guess I should probably choose something that I'm passionate about. Of course, collecting was something I was always really passionate about. And I was like, I wish I could do something with Star Wars, but and no offense, we've got some pretty big authors here with us today. That's pretty well, that's been shredded. So I figured I would try something else. And Sears was always really interesting to me. I grew up in rural South Georgia, and the Sears catalog was such a big part of my childhood. And I know just from talking with people, it's been a large part of a lot of people's childhood. And so when I was choosing my topic for my master's thesis, I remember distinctly looking at a blue Snaggletooth sitting on my shelf, and it just sort of clicked. I was like, well, yeah, Sears, because I had been doing a lot of research and reading, and Sears always seemed to pop up in popular culture and history and things of that nature. So I basically did a regional study on Sears in the South and how it impacted the region. But yeah, it's here lately. It seems like the Star Wars side of it's been bubbling more to the surface, and I've really been enjoying that. But when Jason and Glenn and Ryan asked me to participate in this thing, I was like, okay, well, we could definitely make Star Wars the star of the show. And I've been spending some time trying to make connections between Kenner Toys and Sears, and come to find out there's actually a very close connection. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Sears and sort of where they came from, talk about Richard Sears as a person and sort of his style that endeared the Sears catalog to so many generations of Americans and Canadians too, as a matter of fact. And then I'm going to tie it back to someone that you're a little more familiar with, a man by the name of Bernie Loomis. And so I think in many ways, these two personalities were almost sort of cut from the same cloth. So just to get started, yes, that's me, Christmas 1979, with my BB gun and my figures. So, but as we dive in here, well, there we go, I'm in the wrong button. So Richard Sears was born in Stewartville, Minnesota in 1863, and sort of had a knack for selling things. He was very bombastic in his approach and was really good at he was the kind of guy who could sell, a chunk of ice to an Eskimo. So, and he started his first job at 17 in 1880, and he was a telegraph operator at a railroad station. And a couple years later, he ended up becoming a station agent at Redwood Falls, Minnesota, on the rail line. A lot of folks don't realize just what railroad did to America. If there was ever a product of the railroad age, it was Richard Sears. And he got a batch of watches, which was at the time was sort of a swindle. You would have manufacturers in places like Chicago, and they would send things to these little towns, and they would say, oh, well, so-and-so ordered this, and nobody would claim it, and somebody would say, well, I'll buy it. And Richard Sears got a batch of watches. If you know, it was the railroads that actually standardized time in the United States. Prior to that, I teach this in my class, and prior to the railroad, most of the country were only farmers, and they were only concerned with 3 times a day. The sun comes up, you go to work. When it's directly overhead, you eat lunch, and when it goes down, you go to bed. But now, all of a sudden, time was critical. And so Richard Sears, as the station agent in Minnesota, got this batch of watches from Chicago, and the local jeweler was like, I didn't order that. So he ends up selling the watches up and down the rail line to other station agents because it was the must-have fashion accessory in this new industry. And he ended up making a $5,000 profit off this batch of watches. And he took the $5,000 and started his first company, the R.W. Sears Watch Company. And it expanded really quickly. And he did a lot of advertisements and things like flyers and farmers' newspapers and things like that, because now the farmers had to keep up with the time. And in these advertisements, he really learned that he had this sort of knack for being able to sell things to people. He was really good at it. He convinced people not only of the benefits of the modern world, but also of mail order as a means of getting the things that they needed in these isolated farm towns. So eventually, he moved to Chicago and started the Sears Roebuck and Company in 1891. He actually hired a man by the name of Alva Roebuck, who was a watch repairman, to make good on his lifetime guarantee for his watches that he sold. And he brought in Roebuck, and obviously they built an empire. 1893 was the first Sears catalog. All they sold were watches, but by the turn of the century, the catalog had expanded to over 500 pages. Sears' biggest competitor was Montgomery Ward at the time, and there was a big competition really well into the 20th century between these two companies. But I do love this quote from Cosmopolitan magazine in the late 1890s. It said, which company do you think has the most stores the most sales, the most profits. And at the same time, it's the most loved, the most far-flung, the most legendary, the most American institution ever to charge $2 for a bottle of snake oil. You can literally buy bricks of cocaine from the Sears catalog. They send it to your front door. Obviously, before the Pure Food and Drug Act came about, that started to sort of regulate those things. But Sears was a hustler. He could sell anything. He has been described as Barnum-esque. He was much like P.T. Barnum in his ability to sell things. And he convinced people that read these catalogs to trust him. I don't know how he did that. Some of the things that he sold and these outrageous claims that he made, but people really put their faith in Sears. And he sort of became almost a Santa Claus type figure to a lot of people. Sears retired from the company, a lot of folks don't know, in 1908, and he ended up dying in 1914. But the interesting thing was that his successors, Julius Rosenwald and Robert Wood, General Robert Wood, were successors in the company. They intentionally kept this news quiet from the nation because they didn't want to break that trust that they had established as a company with these country people. And so well into the first half of the 20th century, when people wrote to Sears, they addressed it to Mr. Sears himself. They would always say, write to Mr. Sears. He was almost this sort of godlike figure, like I say, almost a Santa Claus figure. But for the first half of the 20th century, people continued to trust this company and put their faith in them. And then a few years later, in 1933, only a company like Sears would do this. They're in the depths of the Depression, and they put out the first Sears Christmas book. And the term wish book had actually been coined more by country people. It was not something that the corporate Sears actually used. The country people who knew they would never really have a chance to be able to afford some of the wares that were sold in the catalog, they could wish. It was that tangible thing, unlike, your Amazons of today. These guys could actually, people hold these catalogs in their hand. It was the next best thing to actually owning it. But like I say, the first one came out in 1933 at a time where that's about all most people could afford to do was wish. And they maintained the company. They really helped folks. This is where pay now or buy now, pay later really sort of started. Sears would issue credit to people in the country where they could order things. So this catalog comes out and really becomes a sort of perennial thing where by the post-World War II era, people could now afford to engage in this commerce and buy from these catalogs. But they sold all manner of things: Mickey Mouse watches, Lionel trains, dolls that could talk, those kinds of things. But now customers, like I say, could afford some of the wishes and dreams that they found in the pages of the catalog. It wasn't until actually 1968 that the corporate entity Sears adopted the name Wish Book. So it went from the Sears Christmas catalog from 1933 until 1968. It officially became the Wish Book. And it really was something exceptional for, like I say, generations of children who sort of grew up with this. Whether they could afford the items or whether they couldn't, it was the next best thing. And I talked to so many people over the years of researching this, and everybody seems to have a Sears story. They always talk about, oh, I remember that. I was talking to Ryan Shaw just this past week, and he even brought up a story. He said, yeah, we would get these at your grandmother's house, and you would go through the catalogs, and everybody would circle what they wanted and dog-ear the pages, and it was almost like, as adults, when we think about the lottery, when it gets over, $1 billion, oh, if I won the lottery, what would I do with all that money? This was sort of the childhood equivalent of it. But there's a Southern author by the name of Tim McLaurin, I think really sort of captured the magic of this quote. He says, the much more slender Christmas catalog was the coveted one. The mailman would smile as he handed through the window the sleek, shiny, brand new Christmas catalog. The cover adorned with Santa, reindeer, Christmas trees in bright colors, red and green and white. Hands reached to touch the book to feel some of the magic. The Sears catalog was like a mirror. It said, open me, child, look into your heart. Wish and want and believe. And that was, I think, the thing that really endeared it to so many American kids, particularly folks like me who were working class. I was the classic Gen Xer. My parents divorced. We never had a whole lot, but I had that book every fall. It was always a highlight in the fall. It was that Christmas catalog that come in the mail. And yeah, I'd occasionally get a few things out of it, but there were a lot of things that I never did get, at least not until I got older. But those are at the top of the list as I started to collect and get involved with this. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for that wish book and the thing that it did for a generation of American kids. If you look at it from a cultural standpoint, when you think, you know, I actually do this in my classrooms where I'll tell students, I'll say, okay, everybody close your eyes and envision Santa Claus. What does he look like? And I'll sort of walk them through it, and I'll say, okay, you see the white beard, and you see the red hat. A lot of what we know as quote-unquote Santa Claus today was actually taught to us by the Sears catalog, Montgomery Ward catalog, and our first international corporation, Coca-Cola, made right here in Georgia. The advertisements from these mail-order catalogs, and specifically Coca-Cola, sort of taught us what Santa Claus was. You know, if you talk to your grandparents, Christmas was not quite the cornucopia that it is a lot of times. You talk to your grandparents and say, oh yeah, well, we get a stocking with some fruit and some nuts and maybe get a football or a doll. And it's like, you know, really from the 1960s on, it was, you know, the spread. You know, what was under that tree when you came out on Christmas morning. And, you know, I know some folks weren't always as fortunate as others, but I know just in talking to folks, and like I said, we didn't have a lot of money, but it was a highlight of the calendar year for young kids, and I think Sears really sort of played into that. So going forward, of course, everybody knows Bernie Loomis, sort of legend in the toy world, and he taught us so much. And as I was researching for this project, I found this quote from John Wooden's Kenner Collector website. It was an interview just before Mr. Loomis passed away, and he said, "The toy memory of my youth foretold some imagined and creative capabilities. Vinyl trains were beyond my economic reach, but I had a full-color vinyl catalog which gave me ownership of every item in it." And I really felt like that sort of touched on what this does for people with having these catalogs. It was like, you know, Loomis was born in July 4th, 1923. I'd like to think he probably spent a lot of time looking at Sears catalogs as well. But Loomis was an advertising marketing genius, just like Richard Sears. He was from the Bronx. He grew up poor. If you've read very many interviews with Bernie Loomis, he sort of talks about he collected baseball cards. It was about the only thing that he could actually afford. But he always, you know, aspired to these other things, obviously trains. And he mentions in one interview that once General Mills sort of became the conglomerate over Lionel Trains, he told that story. And somebody from Lionel Trains made sure he got the full Lionel Trains set that year for Christmas. But yeah, I think it says a lot about that generation, and even though he couldn't afford to purchase most of the stuff in those catalogs, just having it in your hands made it sort of tangible, made it real. But he attended night school at New York University School of Commerce. Of course, everybody knows he served in World War II in the Philippines, and then he came back. He continued his education, and following the war, finished his schooling and built up a small firm called Samuelson Loomis in New York. He worked as a salesman in the 1950s, where he established a strong relationship with companies like Toys R Us and, of course, Sears. He got a good working relationship with folks at Sears and maintained that relationship through most of his career. In 1960, Bernie Loomis joined the sales department at Mattel Toys, he earned a PhD at UCLA, all the while marketing in the Wheels and Wings division at Mattel Toys, where he was in charge of a new toy line called Hot Wheels. And created a TV show. He was the first guy. He's actually dubbed the man who invented Saturday mornings. And in 1968, he created a television show called Hot Wheels to sell the line. And, well, that was until the FCC stepped in anyway. And made him pull it because they basically said it was a 30-minute advertisement for toys. And, well, of course it was. That was the whole purpose of it. But Loomis became later the president of General Mills' Kenner Toy Division in 1970, where he established a lucrative relationship with Sears. But when he first took the job, he spoke with one of his contacts at Sears, and the buyer at Sears told him, he says, "We never buy a new Kenner toy in its first year." I genuinely believe that Loomis saw this as a statement of personal challenge from the world's largest retailer, and yeah, in the years that followed, he certainly made sure that that was not the case. course, he acquired the licensing for $6 million hand television show, which, yeah, I had those too. And then used the popular show to market the toy line as a clever way of sort of getting around those FCC rules. The show had already been established, so now I can sell these toys, and created one of the better toy lines of the period, I think. This is the same strategy he hoped to use when he famously acquired the Star Wars license from 20th Century Fox in early 1977, just before the movie's release, and of course we know how all that turned out. Yeah, he came on, obviously got the license for Star Wars. We've all heard the story. The famous loneliest decision he ever made in his life was something called the Star Wars Early Bird Certificate Package in 1977. And I know that we all know sort of the story of how the Early Bird Package worked, but at the same time, I don't know that everybody realizes that Kenner continues to go back and use this formula for years to come, because obviously they sold the empty box and the stage, and you didn't get the figures until the following, February or March. But once Kenner gets a working relationship with Sears, they continue to use this formula for Christmas as a means of marketing new toys that wouldn't be available till the following spring. So this formula was such a success, Kenner continued to harness the power of mail order via Sears exclusives, and of course everybody's favorite proof of purchase mail away offers. I think Bernie Lewis was very familiar with the power of mail order and what it could do for the toy business, because we see so much of it from part of the Star Wars line, whether it's the early bird kit or everybody clipping those proof of purchase out of their cards and sending off for whatever new figure was going to be coming up. But of course, then we got, where's it going to go? There, yeah, the Star Wars Holiday Special in 1978. And Kenner made sure that they would not make that same mistake again from 1977. Of course, 1978, we got the Holiday Special November of that year, and it was a game changer, but it was also a 90-minute commercial for toys, let's be honest. So, yeah, a 90-minute television show, a lot of emphasis on the cantina, of course, and we'll see that, when we get to that 1978 Sears catalog. They, of course, ran the 30-second Kenner commercial spot during the holiday special. So, yeah, it sort of did end up being very much what Lewis had been trying to do all along, was using television to sort of market these toys to promote the movie. So, Holiday Special featured a 60-second commercial spot for Kenner toys, but also put heavy emphasis on the most beloved and memorable scene from the movie, the cantina. And that's when we get the 1978 Sears Wish Book that really came out almost in conjunction with the Holiday Special. The Wish Book came out in October of 1978. The Holiday Special was in November. But of course, when we first opened the page to the toy section, wow, we were blown away. I mean, they sold everything. And yes, that's being in the picture with those same Star Wars pajamas that they were rocking. And everybody could have the amazing Star Wars bedroom. Yes, I had that as well. I always found it interesting as well that Star Wars watches is where you can get the first official Star Wars watches, which is really sort of what put Sears on the map. So yeah, they made sure that they would not miss the boat in 1978 and really played it to the hilt. But like I say, when you turn to the toy section, who could forget this one? I mean, if you stop at this cantina, watch out for strangers. And I don't know about you guys, I never got this toy. I wanted it, and I'll be honest, I played with this kid all the time. The kid that's in the picture. And the interesting point, if you go through a lot of the Sears catalogs, a lot of the Kenner toys will have images of children playing with those toys just like they did on the boxes. I think that was a big directive from Kenner to show that play value. Bernie Lewis was really committed to this idea of play value and showing kids how to play with these toys, whether it's on the box art or whether it's in the television commercials that were coming out at the time. But I don't know what happened out here. We lost our energy.
Something's wrong. Just keep going.
So, yeah, we'll get it back up here in a second. This is the big one. This is the full page spread from the toy section. I think everybody remembered those, but yeah, it was an interesting time to be a kid. I was talking to Mark yesterday. I'm sure a lot of you guys have kids as well, and it doesn't work the same today. But today we've got kids becoming millionaires on YouTube. They're going on YouTube and doing these toy videos where they're opening toys and they're showing kids how to play with the toys. It's still there. It's just a different format than it was for our generation. And these kids today, they go to YouTube. My son, oh my God, the hours that he spends on YouTube watching other kids play with their toys is pretty impressive. But yeah, we learned it from the commercials. We learned it from the packaging. We learned it from the pages of the Sears catalog and sort of seeing how this new world worked. Unfortunately, Kenner did not have the Cantina playset ready for the 1978 holiday season. So they went back to the well with the early bird special formula and basically did a cardboard stage. Except this time you actually got the figures with the stage with the cardboard platform. So like the early bird kit, this was an all cardboard construction, served as a perfect accompaniment to highlight Kenner's new Wave 2 Cantina creatures, which were not available widely until the following spring of 1979. And they had a hell of a hit with this thing. They sold a lot of them, of course. This is where we get the now famous blue snaggletooth. The big difference, like I said, you actually received the figures with the playset. But of course, we didn't realize it until the following year, but this was also the premiere of Blue Snaggletooth. And then in '79, of course, it comes back, and that's where they start phasing in the red one. But yeah, just so many things that really just capture imaginations. We get a first glimpse at the new Death Star playset, and the X-Wing, and the TIE Fighter. But like I mentioned earlier, the catalog imagery featured children playing with the toys, which is a hallmark of early Kenner packaging and key marketing strategy for the company. The set featured exclusive early release Cantina creature figures packaged in Kenner General Mills labeled baggies in a white cardboard box that opened on the short end, which included a baggie with 12 pegs for the stage as well. In this, we also see Sears multi-packs, which were sort of a big draw at the time. You could always get figures early. And I'll say for anybody who collects multi-packs, I'll tell you guys what I tell my students when I teach the Kennedy assassination. I won't take you down the rabbit hole, I'm just showing you where the rabbit hole is. Yeah, these multi-packs are sort of my new addiction, but did want to point out, thanks to Jean-Francois Roland, he allowed me to use images from his new book. If you've not gotten it, it is amazing. One of the highlights of it is it actually shows what's inside all of the boxes. So this is from his book, and if you're looking for something that sort of shows that, definitely check out his book. I told him I would give him a little plug. Yeah, the Cantina Adventure set, or Cantina Adventure set is amazing. Toy, obviously you can see the pegs, you see the boxes that the figures came in, and then you have the multi-packs. They also have the Cantina figures available separately in these 2-packs. Most of the multi-packs that came out in the Star Wars era were brown corrugated cardboard boxes, and they had like a little blue stamp on the back that said made in Hong Kong, and it had like a catalog number on it. The only exception to that was the Cantina creatures. They came in the white mailer boxes, whether you got them from the Cantina playset or if you bought them separately. I've been meaning to talk to Ron Salvatore about this because I did notice that the ones that come with the set open on the short end of the box, where the ones that came separately had opened on the long end across the top, and they had a little tab that you would pull open. I'm not sure why they sold those in separate boxes. Ron, you got any insight on that?
Not off the top of my head.
But yeah, this was a way to continue on sort of building those collections, which by that point I think we were all pretty well hooked. But then of course the 1979 Wish Book comes out, and they continued it. We also get our first glimpse of the new Millennium Falcon, which was really sort of a banner item for the 1979 Christmas season. We saw Return to the Cantina Adventure set, but still no Cantina play set. I'm assuming it's probably because Sears didn't want competition between the Cantina Adventure set, which they probably still had warehouses full of, and they didn't want to be marketing. We lost the image. Oh, there it goes. All right, good. You were on at that time, Mark. So yeah, When the 1979 Canteen Adventure set came out, was when they were starting to phase in the new figure. They made the correction on the Snaggletooth, and we're now producing the shorter red version of it. So the way I understand it, it was sort of a crapshoot in 79. If you ordered the Canteen Adventure set, you might get the blue Snaggletooth from the previous year, or you might get the updated set that had the red Snaggletooth. I do know that the boxes that came with the new red Snaggletooth actually had the print on the little white mailer boxes was in red ink to sort of decide between the two. But we also saw, we say, the mini action figure carrying case made its premiere here. The expansion of the die-cast line. This is also where the Millennium Falcon was introduced. The way I understand it, that was actually a Sears exclusive as well. Was the die-cast Falcon was only available from the Sears catalog that year. We also saw the figure multi-pack offerings were a little bit more expanded as well, where we got the new larger 16 figure pack set that came about. Let's see, there it goes. This is actually courtesy of the Star Wars Collectors Archives. Thanks to Gus and Ron and Chris, one of the best resources out there for this kind of stuff. They have a whole section that Ron did on the mailer pack, so the multi-pack, so definitely check that out. But the figure multi-pack offerings also expanded as we see the introduction of the 4-figure pack as opposed to the previous year, the 3-figure pack. You still have the 2 packs with Luke X-Wing and Boba Fett, but you can get the Cantina creatures in the 2 packs there as well. The big one was the 16-figure pack, which I remember as a kid, because you picked up on that. Wait a minute, this Snaggletooth looks different than that Snaggletooth, and I remember gazing at this picture so many times and just sort of like, well, what's the difference here? I couldn't really decipher it as a kid, not knowing that what we know today about the blue Snaggletooth. But when apparently, and I actually talked to Ron about this a few years ago, when the pack was released, the 16-figure pack, it did not include those Snaggletooths. The blue Snaggletooth was actually replaced with Walrus Wing for this particular pack, but had the updated red Snaggletooth included with that.
Yes.
Let's see.
Yes.
Although the Canteen Adventure set was a huge hit for Kenner and Sears, they were moved to discount bins toward the end of the line. Some of the product was eventually sold to General Mills subsidiary Lionel Kitty City. Apparently each store, according to the ad, received approximately 250 of these sets, so apparently they had a lot of them left over because they were sold, if you can see the price there, for $3.91 for a Canteen set with the 4 figures included. So yeah, I'm sure parents were probably thinking to themselves, I bought this and now they're selling less than $4. But, and so, of course, going into 1980, we get a new movie, and that really takes us to a whole new level. And, of course, Kenner and Sears maintain their relationship, and we get to preview some new stuff as well. We get the 1980 Wish Book comes out, and yeah, they went right back to the early bird formula and tried it again, this time with another cardboard playset. It was the Cloud City playset, which is, wow. It had that carbon freeze chamber, and I know for me as a kid, this was such a cool page. I love this image. I mean, I'll be honest, I love Star Wars, but I really consider myself more of an Empire Strikes Back kid, and this just took it to a whole other level. Even the pages in the catalog look distinctly different. But they introduced a new Darth Vader carrying case, which I think pretty much everybody of my age group had one. As well as the new snowspeeder vehicle, introduced a new Tauntaun. We also got a lot of new Empire Strikes Back multi-pack figures. But of course, the star of the show was the Cloud City playset, using that same sort of formula, and included 4 new figures that you couldn't find, in retail stores until the following spring. I did find it interesting. If you look at the little inset over to the side of the display, it has the figures there. And it has them listed as Han Solo investment outfit, Dengar, Ugnaught, and Lobot was not actually called Lobot, so it sort of shows really early in the development of it. He was referred to in that inset photo as Lando's aide. He didn't even have a name at that point. So yeah, it really shows that Sears was really ahead of the curve and getting these exclusive figures, in the little baggies as opposed to, going down to the Kmart at that point in time. So it was a way, sort of a marketing vehicle for Sears to highlight the upcoming toys and the things that will be coming out in the following spring more widely. The interesting is the playset featured a much thinner cardboard construction compared to the Cantina Adventure set. I'm not sure if anybody ever had those, but very flimsy compared to the Cantina. And those tabs, they're damn near impossible to find these things today without the tabs either torn or completely missing. But it included the now iconic carbon freeze chamber, rather flimsy construction, hard to find in good condition without the torn tabs. Included a single white mailer box with blue text on it that said Cloud City playset figures, with 4 bag figures included. I have noticed that there is a variant on these as well. Some of them came with a little baggie with 6 figures, and some of them came with a little baggie with 12 figures. So it depends on, if you were lucky enough to get the ones with the 12 figures or the 12 bags. But I see Ron smiling. Ron, you know something about this? I don't know. No. Okay. I always default to Ron. He's sort of the guru on these things. So, but of course, in the following year, we get Wish Book 1981, and we see a little bit different formula this time for the Sears playset exclusive. Introduced a huge AT-AT vehicle. This was sort of the premiere of that vehicle for the Sears catalog. Introduced Boba Fett Slave One. The new Empire Strikes Back diecast line was included in here. The Yoda hand puppet, which I think a lot of folks ended up getting one of those as well. Oops, sorry, it was back up there. More new multi-packs, of course, highlighting a lot of the new Empire Strikes Back figures. They got, which one of my favorite things, I don't know if you've ever noticed it, the Sears generic space figure case. These things, they had them for years after this premiere. It seemed almost every one of the catalogs till the end of the line, they were still hawking these cases. They also had another exclusive, the Imperial Cruiser. I know some of you are probably familiar with it. This vehicle was a mainstay for the Sears Wish Book, lasted almost till the end of the line. You could get that in pretty much every successive issue that came after. For the 81 Wish Book, they brought this in with, basically, it was a gutted Imperial troop transport that they'd taken the electronics out of to sort of make it more better price point to sell in the catalog. You slap on some new stickers, take out the electronics. You did have a cavernous storage area in these, so you could cram a lot of figures in it. I think the play value was definitely there, but I still prefer the one with the electronic sounds. That was one of my favorite toys as a kid. Speaking of the slap-on concept, Kenner actually introduced a new formula for playsets this time, designed to market the new upcoming figures. The previous catalogs had the Cantina Adventure set and the Cloud City playset, but now they start retreading some of the bases. Of course, we know with the Hoth playset, they retreaded for the Hoth Adventure set, but they also did it for the new Rebel Command Center, which was that 1981 Series exclusive that they featured, and was highlighting obviously the new wave of figures for Empire Strikes Back. They had Luke Hoth, AT-AT Commander, and R2 Sensor Scope that came with that new set. And again, just became sort of the new formula going forward. Was I think people felt like they were getting better value for their money because you had something, a hard plastic base as opposed to those cardboard, stages that they had built in the previous years. But yeah, they got a lot of wear out of this particular mold. Originally it was the Land of Jawas playset, which was the first playset I ever had as a kid. I loved that thing. The little snap shooting feature was just awesome. And then that year, 1981, they retreaded that base as the Hot Ice Planet Adventure set, and the new Rebel Command Center was also featured there. The thing that's interesting is if you ever compare the size of the boxes for the Land of the Jawas and the Rebel Command Center, it was basically the same playset. In fact, I think Rebel Command Center probably had less stuff included with it. But the box is like huge. I think they were really trying to make folks feel like they were getting their money's worth of this thing, and you open it up and it's like when you open a bag of chips. It's like, wow, 2/3 of this box is like there. What am I getting here? But it was packaged in this huge oversized box, considerably larger than its counterparts. I'm assuming for perceived value, but features corrugated cardboard backdrop with the Hoth Rebel base, which is a beautiful piece of art. I know one collector actually has the original artwork David Marcus has that in his collection. I'm just so envious of that. It's just beautiful art. But it is a play of the Land of the Jawas molded in white. And we mentioned the 3 exclusive figures came in a little white corrugated box that was actually glued into the packaging. Yeah, those are sort of the gem from the set. So there it is in the box, and as you can see, yeah, there's a lot of air in that thing. But it was a cool play set nonetheless. Like I say, it was a good vehicle to sell some of those new figures before they hit the market. There's our Imperial Cruiser, sort of side-by-side comparison. With the Sears exclusive Imperial Cruiser was a retread of the Imperial Troop Transport, but with the electronics taken out. We mentioned that, reduced price point. And they continue to use this in a lot of the other issues of the Wish Book as the years that followed. Here's an interesting one, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, I know about those. So the interesting thing is that the exclusive figures, Empire Strikes Back exclusive figures from 80 and 81, from the Cloud City playset, you had Ugnaught and Han Bespin and Dengar and Lando's A, blah, blah. And then you had the Rebel Command Center figures as well. Canada, I'm not sure how this came about, took all of those figures and actually packaged them on these vacuum-formed cards. These things are super, super rare today. I think I just saw a card with the loose figure sell for like $400 on eBay just last week. These in really good condition are thousands of dollars at this point. But yeah, they are definitely one of those sort of grail pieces for a lot of collectors that are into these sort of packaging variants. But yeah, pushing forward here. Let's see. Make sure I'm in my right notes. There we go. So again, 1982, we get the new Wish Book. This is actually the 50th anniversary of the Sears Christmas catalog. So they had the Courier and Ives artwork on the cover there to commemorate the occasion. There are, for anybody who's into catalogs, they did 250 issues of these in hardback to give to their executives at Sears. They occasionally will pop up on eBay and places like that, but gorgeous catalog, hardbound. It's almost like a green vinyl, looks like faux leather or whatever with the Courier image on it, but pretty cool collectible there. But in the 82 edition, features the largest selection of Empire Strikes Back releases up to that point, including multi-packs, the final wave of Empire Strikes Back figures, as well as the Sears perennial favorites. The Imperial Cruiser is back, as well as the space figure case. Mysteriously, Sears offered the previously released Imperial Attack Base as an exclusive. I personally think Sears might have purchased the last of Kenner's unsold units at some point and then just started selling them because they will actually continue selling this playset in a couple of future editions of the Sears Wish Book. But the Empire Strikes Back multi-packs sort of changed. They went to a white corrugated box with blue text and sometimes included the line art, which these are some of the more sought after multi-packs that are available with the line art on the package. With the blue text. These included 8, 9, 15 figure packs. The 15 figure pack was sold with both plain text as well as line art graphics. I did find it interesting that the one with the text on it actually has Luke in flight suit as opposed to Luke X-Wing pilot. I thought that was kind of a new, interesting little tidbit there. But towards the end of the Empire Strikes Back line, product was again deeply discounted to make room for the next movie. And of course, Lionel Kitty City got a lot of the leftovers. This time it wasn't quite as steep a discount. It sold the Cloud City playset for $7.91. So it's still, not super cheap, but then they made room for the new stuff. Return of the Jedi comes along in 1983. You start to see it. By this point, guys, I know Bernie Lewis is probably smiling because that Sears salesman had told him that we never buy Sears or Kenner toys on their first run. And interestingly enough, in '83 they really brought their A game. Not only did they include all sorts of stuff for decorating your rooms, the R2D2 toy box, shampoos and soaps and all of this stuff, but it was sort of interesting. In the '83 edition, they moved the Star Wars toys from the back of the catalog up to the front of the catalog, right next to the ladies' lingerie. Don't ask me why. But just a little bit closer to the front of the catalog. Really sort of highlighting all of the new Star Wars wares for the new movie. But yeah, by that point, I think Kenner really ruled the world. So, the 1983 Wish Book introduced new Return of the Jedi toys, such as the Jabba the Hutt playset, which everybody loved. The new Return of the Jedi multi-packs, of course, the speeder bike. We start to see the battle-damaged TIE fighter and X-wing fighter come about there. We also see the X-wing fighter and Y-wing fighter comes on. That's a new vehicle that they introduced. The C-3PO collector's case comes about. There's that Imperial Cruiser again. They're still trying to sell that in the hot place. I guess they did buy a lot of those leftovers. The new vehicle to sell the new figures was, of course, the Jabba the Hutt Dungeon, which served to highlight the newest exclusive figures, Klaatu, Stickguard, Nick 2, and 88. But again, retreading it, they're using the old Droid Factory base where they sort of retooled it a little bit. But they got their money's worth out of those molds as well. So we got the Droid Factory for Star Wars, and they repackaged it again for Empire, and then they retooled the mold for the base. They added a branding iron, so I guess that was a new part for the dungeon. But you get the branding iron in the hook. But yeah, again, just a vehicle to sort of highlight and market those new toys that sort of came about. So this would have been the third release of the toy. It was a great way to squeeze more profit and play value from the molds. So 1984, we start to really sort of hit the stride for the line. This is really the pinnacle as far as the Sears Wish Book is concerned. 1984 Wish Book was a treasure trove of Return of the Jedi goodness, introduced a massive Imperial shuttle vehicle, which is still one of the coolest vehicles of the entire line, I think. The B-Wing fighter, the TIE Interceptor, the laser rifle carry case, which I always thought was pretty genius. We have the Rancor Monster, everybody's favorite. Size Noodles and the Rebo Van, apparently really a lot of big fans of that one. That sort of premiered in the 84 Cadillac. I heard applause for that one. So, I love the Rebo Van. But the newest Sears exclusive was not so new. They actually did another retread of the Jabba the Hutt Dungeon. They updated the previous release of the Jabba the Hutt Dungeon, simply recast the base and boom arm in new colors instead of gray and dark gray. They did tan and dark brown. But this is where they really highlighted what was going to be the Power of the Force line. You got E99, Barada, and Man were included in this set, which would not have been available, widely until the following spring. We also see a new approach for multi-packs as well. They, instead of doing, line art or the blue text, they really sort of streamlined the process. They got just a general action figure sticker that they put on the front of the box, and then on the back it would have a unique sticker with SKU as well as a list of the figures that were included. And they had free figure packs as well as 8-figure packs of different size boxes. Each box was generic. But it had the proof of purchase down the spine of the box. So, unlike the previous releases of mailer packs, you didn't get that proof of purchase, which was sort of legit because by this point, those proof of purchase are like money for kids at that point. So to get the mailer box and have those proofs of purchase included was pretty cool, I think, for kids. There's actually one of those still sealed available this weekend. See if I can work out a deal on that. But anyway, then 1985 came. I found it interesting if you go and look at the 1985 edition of the J.C. Christmas catalog. They did a full page in J.C. that featured Power of the Force and droids and Ewoks, and they were really, it looked like they were playing up the line. I think Sears saw the writing on the wall by this point, because the 1985 Wish Book, you didn't get that big double-page spread like you've gotten the previous, 7 years or whatever for Star Wars toys. Instead, they had a half page, and everything was deeply discounted by that point. They were trying to move these things out. I think they saw the end of an era. Gone were the days of multi-page spreads of the hottest toys in the galaxy, but in 85 was pared down to just a half page. Then we talk about what happened to Sears, and this has been a struggle for me to put this thing together of like well, how are we going to end this on a positive note? Because we all know what's happening to Sears, and it's sort of heartbreaking for those of us who grew up with these things. But in 1992, Sears, they kept pushing. They kept doing the Wish Book for a few more years, continued to produce it, maintained a relationship with Kenner. They highlighted lines like Masks, Centurions, Chuck Norris, of course the Care Bears and Strawberry Shortcake were there. But 1992, they produced the last official Wish Book. It was that same year Walmart surpassed Sears in sales, and Sears was no longer the world's largest retailer. The last official Sears Wish Book was published in 92. Sears has since produced some special editions, and I know that the Sears Canada continued to produce the Wish Book just for a few more years beyond that, but this was the last one produced in the States. They did do a few special editions, and of course in 1999 when episode 1 premiered, can you believe it's been 25 years old? I'm starting to feel my age these days, but yeah, they did try and bring the magic back. They did do a multi-page, I think it was about a 20-page insert that Sears did to highlight some of the new merchandise for the Phantom Menace, but unfortunately for Sears by that time, they were really already on the downslope. And I've had conversations with Sears executives, and everybody talks about how come Sears didn't maintain that as savvy as they always were. And I'll be honest, if you talk to a lot of the executives within the company, they'll tell you it really was Sears sort of had this mindset that they were too big to fail. In the 1970s, they built the Sears Tower, and I've heard so many employees say, yeah, they were building a memorial to themselves is what that tower was about, because they only maintained offices in that tower a few years before they ended up pulling everybody out of the tower and moving out to a new complex in Hoffman Estates. Sadly, Sears filed for bankruptcy in 2018, and they've been selling off the company piecemeal, mostly on the real estate. They have a new CEO, his name's Eddie Lampert, and don't bring up his name around Sears retirees, they curse him. Oh my God, they hate that man. But yeah, it definitely left an impression on so many of us. Pop culture geek and nostalgia junkie Jason Liebig states, we take it for granted now, but it was truly world-changing at the time to have so many different products, 600 pages worth at our fingertips. Sears was the Amazon of their day, or should I say that Amazon is the Sears of today. And although Sears filed for bankruptcy in 2018, the company has left an indelible stamp on multiple generations of children. Today, those children continue to engage in mail-order transactions via online retailers and personal trades as adults on Facebook. So I'd be curious to know just how much the people in this room spent for postage just this past week of buying things through the mail. I do think that those mailer boxes that Kenner did all those years ago really hooked us, because I was talking to somebody last night at Orion's, and it's like, when we were children didn't get mail. That was an adult thing. For kids to get something in the mail, that was special. And I know for those of us who clipped out those proofs of purchase coupons and sent those things back to Kenner, it was like waiting for Santa Claus to come. And when they said 6 to 8 weeks, by God, they meant 6 to 8 weeks. We waited every minute. Just every day we would check the mailbox. And it reminds me, Peter Billingsley looking for his little orphan Annie ring. Christmas story. Open the mailbox, it's still not here. You leave the mail in and you go in the house. But yeah, I think it really left a huge impact on so many of us. And I think today, we as adults, we can still pick up those wish books, and it just instantly sort of takes us back to that period in our childhoods where, even though we might not own these things, although a lot of us do own those things now, it really does sort of take us back to that moment in our childhood. But I did want to thank Ron Salvatore for his help in this. Ben Sheehan also played a big role in this. I talked to him a lot. So first of all, we're introduce from his amazing book. Definitely check it out. Jason Lasulko, Glenn Williams, Ryan Knight, and of course Ryan Shaw. Thank you all so much for your support and putting this thing together, guys. I don't know about you. I think we're writing a great chapter for Star Wars collectors this weekend, and it's such a pleasure to meet so many of y'all and finally put names and faces together. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your support, and y'all have a good time. I'm looking forward to this one. Have a good night, guys. Thank you. guys, I did have some swag. It's Ryan the Swag King told me. It's my panel gift. So be sure to stop by and see me, and I'll make sure everybody gets one. I make plenty of them. So.
Jerry, before you leave, this is your gift.
Another round of applause for Jerry Hancock.
I just wanted to mention real briefly when you were talking about, I think it was Bernie during the panel, or you were talking about some counter employee, and I saw Howard and Tim look at each other and smile and nod in a way of like, yep, that's right. Yep, I remember that. And I thought that was such a cool thing. You were just so focused on delivering the panel. And I just wanted to bring it up to let you know that it touched Tim and Howard in a way where it's just like, oh, yep, that's exactly it. And it's got to be good for them to hear that like the legacy will continue on through things like this.
Yeah.
So
it definitely was closure for me to see them sitting there. Oh, wow. I mean, if you're going to sell it to anybody, you got to sell it to these guys. And they were literally front and center. Tim had his knee surgery, so he had to have his leg elevated. But yeah, to have those guys sitting there, yeah, it couldn't have been more rewarding, I don't think.
So what was that like to start Rogue Fun with the first panel? What was going through your mind, and how did you feel afterwards?
It was an honor, really. It was to, a lot of folks are like, so what's it going to, how do you like this being the opening act? I never saw it that way whatsoever. I felt like I was like fortunate enough to sort of, I hope, raise the bar to a certain degree. And Rich a lot was making jokes before I went on the panel. He's like, don't bring none of this A bullshit. You better C at best. Because they were, coming later in the night. I think he was but I know he was just joking or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I just poured my heart and soul into it because it's something that I'm passionate about. I think that was pretty palpable for folks as well because, like I was saying before the segment, that I had so many people come up to me sharing their Sears stories and oh, I remember the Sears department store in my hometown and going, and they had this one display and it was amazing. It was like they built this whole diorama, I mean, it was just so cool that everybody sort of has a Sears story, at least from our age group, folks who are our age who remember when Sears was king.
It was the Walmart of its time.
It was Walmart and Amazon combined. That's what I tell my students. And guys, you don't understand how big Sears was because they see it as like this antiquated thing, if they've ever even really heard of it. But I'll tell you the one thing that works with young people, and I do it every year because I actually teach a segment on Sears and mail order in the late 1800s. And I have reprints of some of the turn of the century catalogs. And I throw those things on a table in front of the students, and I kid you not, they could spend the entire class period looking at those. They still have that magnetism that it just draws people in, reading the descriptions, looking at the prices and all of the different selection that they had. Sears really did teach America what they want, what the nation wanted before we even knew we wanted it. That was, I think, Richard Sears' real magic, and that tradition continued, throughout most of the 20th century. So, but yeah, it was an honor to be there. It was an honor to present first. I mentioned this when somebody posted on the club page, Mark Rusciano's amazing introduction. That video introduction was just an emotional overload for me because I was watching it. I couldn't believe, first of all, how professional it looked and how polished it looked. And going through and seeing this opening scene, it really, that montage of from Rogue One, and then just as it builds to the crescendo, he throws this joke in there about Narayan and swag. And as I'm about to crack up, that
the logo
Death Peach drops and that opening John Williams music kicks in. And I was literally laughing, crying, chills, all simultaneously. It was just an emotional overload. And after that, it really charged me up. if I didn't realize the caliber of production that you guys were hosting when that happened, wow, it just it maxed the bar out, and I'm like, I better bring it for this.
And it was
because
brought.
this is incredible. Wow,
Right.
it was just, and Glenn even laughed. You know, a lot of folks didn't even catch the joke when we showed it at the ticketed event because they were cheering as
Yeah.
it built up, and when that peach dropped, man, the place just went bananas. So
Mhm.
yeah, that really set the bar for, I think, the entire event. People realize at that point, holy crap, this is like the first drop on a roller coaster ride. So yeah,
Nice.
you
That's a
better
nice
bring
metaphor for it.
Right.
it.
You struggled with the end because you felt like, Sears doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
And it's such a downer. So how did you find the ending, and how do you feel about the panel as a whole?
Coincidentally, my wife helped me with that. We were sitting at dinner one night and she had made the suggestion. I was sort of telling her the situation I was in. I'm like, I've built this presentation and I felt like it was a good presentation, but, I hate to keep using these parallels from my classroom, but I always tell students when they're writing a paper, it's always awkward writing a conclusion. It's that's always the hardest part of the paper is how you tie it up with a big bow. And Jason, you and I had talked about this, about how do you make a happy ending with something that's not such a happy ending. Sears filed for bankruptcy in 2014.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
They're gone.
not a happy ending for Sears. But my wife sort of made me think about it on a level that, look at the impact that it has had on an entire generation of Star Wars collectors, at least for the old timers, for the old guard Star Wars collectors, the first OG generation
The
of
first
Star Wars
wave.
collectors. Yeah, we remember Sears. We remember that Wish Book, and I do think that mail order as a whole, for children to get something in the mail, I think that is the essence of the whole thing. I mean, you can talk about the marketing genius of Richard Sears and Bernie Loomis and the things that Kenner did, but I think the magic of it is for a child. Because as kids, we would see our parents get things in the mail. We never got anything in the mail. For us to get something in the mail, that was, I don't know, it did something to us as a generation, because look how much how much mail order commerce we as collectors engage in today.
Yeah.
I mean,
today.
there's very few days that go by that we don't have at least one box on the doorstep.
Right.
It's the highlight of getting home from work. This is how we get out of our adult world, is we come home and go, I've got a toy on the doorstep when I get home. I just feel like that's the one thing that sort of is laced through all of this. And so my wife sort of got me to think about it that way. What kind of an impact has it had? Don't think about what's happened to the country. That's second, or the company. That's secondary. What kind of impact has it had on people? And I don't think it's had a bigger impact on any group of folks. Maybe the old folks who lived in the early 20th century. But for our generation, I think that mail order element and Star Wars was central in that, of bringing those things, bringing that magic to our doorstep. This idea that even if I don't have a lot of money, I could still interact with that. I made the statement in the panel about the kid in the Cantina Adventure Set image in 1978. I played with that kid. I never owned that toy. But I played with that kid. Every time I opened that catalog, I would envision as a child what kind of things we could do with that toy. And even though I never owned it, never physically interacted with it, didn't know anybody that owned it, I do feel like that was really the essence of it. It was like Bernie said in the statement, I own that full color Lionel Train set catalog, therefore I owned everything in it.
Yep.
And I think that was the real magic of it. So, but I had other folks that come up afterwards and they're like, I played with that kid too.
So the feeling was mutual.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, what are people's reaction after the panel? What did they say to you? What resonated?
I was floored to have collectors that I have an immense respect for. To have Ron come up and say, wow, that was a really great panel. Or Chris Dragoulias, who comes up and was, he was sending me messages during the panel.
Yeah.
They used that toy in the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Did he not know that beforehand, or was he?
I did not. I
Oh, did
wish
he?
I had. I would have absolutely highlighted that. I wish I
Did he know that, or was he making connections during your panel?
He was sending it in Messenger. He was. So
he knew it beforehand.
Yeah, he knew about
Okay.
it. He sent me the screenshot of Lopi's bedroom when there's the toy laying on the floor. And I obviously, I knew it from the catalog because for those of us who grew up with these catalogs, you memorized them. You know what every little detail, where it was on the page.
Yeah.
Description. The description was a big part of it. That was something that went back to Richard Sears, was giving a vivid description of the item to make you want to purchase it. I mean, it's an act of psychology, really. But even if you couldn't, that was the wish. I mentioned it in the panel, is that that phrase "wish book" was not Sears. That was created by poor people in the country. They called it the wish book from the late 1800s because so many of them knew
Wish they could buy
able to own any of this stuff. But it was entertainment at a time where, you talk about the Sears catalog was the only reading material in most homes in America at the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah.
So yeah, to go in and read that was your reading material, not to mention, all the other things that it was used for. You hear the stories of people keeping in the outhouse and stuff like that. Those are, old things that, Jimmy Carter.
Hey, look here, honey, we can buy snake oil for 5 cents.
Exactly. I can buy a block of cocaine. I can buy, They had this one thing. It was called Vin de Coca, and it was literally wine with cocaine in it. I mean, it's like a party in a bottle.
Oh
Before
my
the Pure
gosh!
Food and Drug Act, you could buy practically any of that stuff. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I didn't, or did I? Maybe I did bring it up in the panel. I can't remember because again, I've talked about this stuff for so many years. But the Heidelberg belt, which was basically the late 1800s version of Viagra. It was this belt with electrodes that men could put around their waist, and it had an electrode that strapped around your junk, and you plugged it in the wall, and they sold thousands of these things.
You get shocked.
Yeah, I mean, how many guys, singed themselves?
My gosh.
But Richard Sears made it sound legit, so people bought them by the truckload. But yeah, it's an amazing topic. It really is. And for somebody who grew up in a rural area, it's sort of funny. I'm living back in that same rural area today, but to grow up in rural South Georgia, that catalog was everything. I mean, even all my school clothes came from Sears.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that's why I named it Santa's Shop there, is because I used to make that joke. Santa was a dedicated Sears man when I was a kid. Vast majority of what was under the tree, that came from Sears. So,
awesome.
But yeah, it was great. It was an honor to present and to be a part of something that was just so well received and still, even now, 2 weeks later, people are still talking about it. The folks who were there, it's become the stuff of legend at this point, and the folks who were not there are just like, tell me more about this magical moment in Star Wars collecting. So yeah, you guys you did something special.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Glenn?
No, I want to say something because I've learned a lot by watching you and watching Ryan, because I didn't nerd out the way you did with all these, with with Tim and with, learning these guys and knowing the old Kenner guys, or like
Yeah.
with the wax sculpts or with sculpting, until I see like you, somebody like you, or like Ryan geek out over it. And you're like, I need to geek out over this too. So hearing you talk about it and just hearing you geek out over the fact that Tim Effler's sitting front row for the panel, it's really awesome. And it's a joy to watch you geek out over it.
I mean, that's the thing about Star Wars collecting. I think it's got a little bit of something for everybody. Everybody sort of makes it their own thing. It's yeah. I mean, we grew up with this stuff. It's the thing that it gives us a break from the doldrums of our adult life to be able to go back and to, even when we don't really play with them, we pose them, right?
Right.
I'm displaying. No, you're not. You're playing with them. That's call it what it is. I crack up when I hear collectors that go, "Oh, yeah, I'm displaying this," and no, you're not. You're playing with toys. Let's be honest here. Come on.
You're doing it in your own way, but yeah.
Yeah. Everybody makes it their own thing. So yeah, I and to see the guys that really designed our childhoods, they did. I mean, it's the ultimate compliment for me anyway. Like I say, to look out and see those guys sitting there, like Jason was saying, nodding, and yep, that's Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Howard, one of the last things he said in their panel at the end of the night is he was making a point, and he said, "I think Bernie Loomis was the greatest toy salesman that ever lived." He really put a strong emphasis on that there in his 5-minute extension that he gave him after they'd already gone 15 minutes over.
Right. And some jerk off was standing there with a microphone yelling at him.
Yeah.
To get off the stage.
Well, the thing wasn't, and I'll be honest, I was doing it during my panel because I knew that we were pressed for time. And I really sort of tried to shave off as much as I could there at the end and do the panel justice. But at the same time, I did have a few folks that I had wanted to thank. Ron Salvatore obviously was a huge role in this. I also thanked Jason Liebig, who's a big sort of pop culture nerd. He's got a lot of podcasts. He's done television shows on Food Network, stuff like that. He's got a great website called wishbookweb.com, and you can go in and literally look at, he has them cataloged, all of the catalogs. He has Sears, Montgomery Ward, JCPenney, and you literally can open it up, and when you turn the page, it makes the sound. So it's like interactive, even though it's not, you don't have the real catalog. When you turn the page, you hear the so that's kind of cool. I wanted to thank Jean-Francois Roland, who did an incredible book. If you've not checked it out, I know this is audio mostly, but 1978 to 1985 Kenner Toy Line, incredible book. When it came out, I just fell in love with it because it shows the packages open, what's inside of it, the inserts, how everything was packaged together. We didn't really have that outside of, the Rebel Scum forums. There's some great imagery on there that shows what was in the boxes and stuff like that. But it was a little cumbersome if you wanted to know something to have to go and dig it up on Rebel Scum, where to have an actual hard copy of it was impressive. And Jean-Francois was so accommodating. I told him, and I loved his book, and could I use some of the images from his book in the presentation, because I loved the way he had everything sort of laid out. And got a lot of compliments afterwards from folks were asking about those pictures. And I was like, yeah, you got to check out this book. It is a great reference book to have as a collector, particularly if you're collecting, packaged vintage items. He did a great job with that book. Also highlighted the KennerCollector.com page where I got the Bernie Loomis interviews. Some great resources there. Howard Bollinger has a lot of comments that he's made in there on their forums where folk post questions about certain toys and stuff. And it's beyond just Star Wars. It's a lot of other Kenner lines. Glenn, I know you collect the Bill and Ted stuff. If you've not been on there, definitely check out that resource, man. It is phenomenal. And it's just, there's a lot of stuff to see on that page. But yeah, a lot of those folks really, helped me make this what it is, I always call it standing on the shoulders of giants. That's what we do. You find these folks who came before, you take their stuff and use it to make something else, not necessarily something better, but to take it to the next level. So,
Well, thank you for being part of Rogue Fun. Thank you for helping kick it off. Thank you for sharing your expertise. That was one thing that Narayan, myself, Rich, and Steve were talking about at breakfast, is that you're probably the foremost knowledgeable person on Sears. And just the fact that you're our friend, that you're a Star Wars collector, we just really got lucky, and we really appreciate everything you did, the dedication, the pulling all the information together for us to help lay out how important Sears was to Star Wars and to the country as a whole.
Well, thank you guys, because really, I think it's where it started. I did a episode with you guys a couple of years ago, just talking about the catalogs and stuff, and I know that when you first sort of had this glimmer of this idea of this thing, you didn't even have a name for it yet. But you wanted to focus on folks in Georgia, folks who were local, part of the club. And yeah, you had mentioned, you're like, yeah, if we ever do something, I really want you to present something on Sears.
That's right.
So
I remember that now.
Keeping me in mind.
Yeah.
You guys, y'all really were the ones that sort of made this thing a reality. And so, yeah, like I say, to be a part of it was just such an honor. And wow, I've gotten such a response from so many people. I'm still getting friend requests and questions and
nice,
stuff like that. So yeah, apparently it hit a nerve with a lot of people. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, guys. Absolutely. I do appreciate it.
And thank you to David Quinn from the Star Wars Prototypes and Production Podcast for recording the panels.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, buddy.
And thank you, listener, for listening to the Smugglers Galaxy Podcast. If you could, please leave a like or 5-star review of the show anywhere you listen to podcasts. If it's allowed, really helps us out and points people to a show. You could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Send us an email or message us. We love feedback. We love to make you part of the show. Our email address is smugglersgalaxy@gmail.com. Thank you to Alfonso Riviera for the Smugglers Galaxy logo. And thank you to Levi Waterhouse for the music. People collect for the love of it. # vote with your wallet. Sabine will be on next week. Pass on what you've learned. Be a positive force in the collecting community. This is the way.
This is the way.
Well.